Hey, I'm Laura. Just quickly, we here at GRITtv are proud to bring you independently produced content every day. Now it's your chance to help us. GRITtv has been offered a $100,000 challenge grant. Every dollar you give right now between now and June 30th is worth $3 to us. We've only got a few more weeks to meet the match. Will you help? You can donate at our website, grittv.org. Meanwhile, enjoy this clip. First off, cozy relations between companies and politicians? Since when did corruption become cozy? A spill. Isn't that the kind of thing you're supposed to be able to wipe up with a couple of paper towels? Commandos attacked by activists on a boat the commandos are raiding? Is the truth about what happened to the Gaza Freedom Flotilla all just a matter of dueling videos? Well, if you're a regular viewer of this program, you know that we like to try, at least, to keep the media honest. Joining us to help do that in just a moment is Jim Naureckas of the media watch group FAIR. But first, this from Fox News, June 1st, Charles Krauthammer with William Crystal.
What exactly is the humanitarian crisis that the flotilla was actually addressing? There is none. There's no one starving in Gaza. The Gazans have been supplied with food and social services, education by the UN, by UNRWA, for 60 years, in part with American tax money.
As Charles said, they can get plenty of humanitarian aid into Gaza. If they want more humanitarian aid to Gaza, airlift in 5 million tons of nice goods, and the Israelis will just take a look and make sure they're not arms and let them go through the checkpoint. This checkpoint is open. Stuff goes through it every day.
Well, it's not as if we go to Fox News for balanced reporting, but that was quite a pylon of not very diverse opinion. Jim, how typical was the Fox report of all reporting that first night after the news had broken that Israeli commandos had raided that Gaza Freedom Flotilla?
Well, I think what was interesting about that Fox clip is that they are sort of stating explicitly what goes unstated in most of the media. They are making an explicit case for there being no big deal in Gaza and nothing to worry about. And in most of the corporate media, it just goes without saying that the humanitarian issues that the flotilla is intended to address are really not worth talking about. It's not a big deal because you don't need to talk about it. And
talk about journalists' responsibilities on that Monday. It was a holiday Monday in the United States, Memorial Day, so maybe people might have woken up late to the news. But even if they did tune in to their radio, television, it was too late for the papers, most of them, but even online, did viewers and readers get the basics of what they needed to know to understand what had just happened there in the Mediterranean?
I think the context was almost entirely missing. I think that it was presented as a story about a kind of confusing skirmish on the high seas. And to the extent that there was context, it was largely added by the Israeli government, which put its spin on, sounding actually much like Charles Krauthammer, that really, the flotilla should have just gone to an Israeli port and they would have taken care of it, and there's no need to go through all this fuss.
To what extent do people in this country even know there is a humanitarian crisis in Gaza? That's one of the things that occurred to me, a big divide between those who've been paying close attention to this issue and just about everybody else.
Well, the Gaza is almost a reporter-free zone. The Western reporters rarely get into Gaza, in part because it's been made so difficult to get in and out of Gaza that it's not really practical to be based there. Not to mention the fact that it's pretty hard to live a normal life when you're surrounded by a blockade. So you have, I think very much by design, the media coverage of the Israel-Palestine issue is based in Israel and looks at things from an Israeli perspective. The notion that there is territory that is occupied by Israel that is not part of the nation of Israel is something that you very rarely see mentioned in coverage.
What about the humanitarian crisis? I mean, major organizations, Amnesty International and others, have said there is a crisis of malnutrition, starvation, lack of water. Yeah,
Krauthammer refers to the UN there. The UN says that 10% of the population of Gaza is suffering from chronic malnutrition as a result of the blockade. Much of the health infrastructure there has been destroyed. people are dying of, children dying of preventable diseases because of lack of sanitation. This is all documented and very much available to a reporter who is doing a story and wants to let people know what's going on.
And presumably relevant to claims that humanitarian aid has no problem getting through.
Right. It's I think, easier to report the story simply as you said, a battle of videotapes rather than talking about what the story is actually about.
Glenn Greenwald did make an appearance on MSNBC this week on a show that was being substitute hosted by Elliot Spitzer. This was his experience. This is a moment of it. Take a look.
You have ships approaching Gaza, controlled by Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist organization. Israel did, I don't think this is disputed, offer to have the ships inspected. If there was no contraband on board, let the ships continue on to Gaza. Why was that not a reasonable offer, and why can Israel not intercede to stop the flow of contraband?
Well, first of all, international waters, which is where this ship was, is not owned by Israel. It is a crime, a war crime, to attack a ship in international waters that is not engaged in any aggression. And no one claims that these ships were. I mean, what you're describing is absolute anarchy, that any country can just say, no ships can go here, and if you disobey our order, we're going to attack you, board your ship forcefully, and kill anybody who doesn't resist. Secondly, let me just finish, because you just had on 10 minutes of uninterrupted pro-Israeli propaganda filled with falsehoods.
Jim.
Well, I think that was a rare example of someone getting to make the case for both the humanitarian crisis and international law, which is another thing that was very rarely brought up or brought up to be dismissed.
I was kind of struck that in those first hours after the attack, most of those who were eyewitnesses to what had happened were kept in detention by the Israeli authorities. Journalists, were they justified in saying, well, we didn't have their perspective, we had to go with what we had?
There was a great deal of, here's what happened via the Israeli government. You know, the people who had just killed 9 humanitarian activists. In most situations, they would not be the people you would go to ask, well, what was going on here? But in coverage of Israel-Palestine, that's quite common to take the side that is killing people and ask them, you know, why they killed them and what's going on here.
Well, moving from the subject that brought us sentences like commandos attacked by activists, let's go to the British Petroleum story, where it's been a long time in developing, but at this point, how would you cost the coverage?
Well, I think that there has been a similar failure to talk about the context of the spill and a sort of reliance on these myths of offshore drilling equaling cheap gasoline, which is such an appealing idea that you're going to magically get free gas from under the sea. That the corporate media seem very reluctant to let go of that. You'd think that a disaster on this scale would lead to some rethinking, some reevaluation. But we've seen a continuation of the sort of Pollyanna coverage of oil drilling that followed Obama's announcement that oil drilling was going to be part of his climate bill, was going to involve more offshore drilling. That kind of cheerleading for petroleum extraction, I think, has continued even as we have seen the largest environmental disaster in the history of the country.
People can track FAIR's coverage of the BP oil spill as well as their commentary on the coverage of the Israeli attack on the flotilla at their website. We'll put a link at our website, GRITtv.org. Thanks for coming in, Jim.
Great to be on.